Have you ever heard the story of a shooting star? I'm not talking about the ones in the night sky. I'm talking about the kind you see in the business world. A startup, let's call them Elysian, that bursts onto the scene with a brilliant idea. They had everything going for them. A charismatic founder, tens of millions in funding, a team of geniuses poached from top companies. Their mission was plastered on every wall. How do we build the future? They hosted brainstorming sessions, innovation labs, and vision casting retreats, all centered on that one intoxicating question. How do we succeed? 2 years later, Elysian was gone, a spectacular flameout. The money vanished, the team scattered, and the brilliant idea became a footnote in a tech blog's list of failures. In the post-mortem analysis, the reasons were painfully obvious. They were so focused on the dazzling vision of success that they never stopped to ask a different, far more important question. What could absolutely, unequivocally guarantee our failure? They didn't consider cash flow mismanagement, toxic team dynamics, or a simple lack of market demand for their future. They were staring so intently at the stars that they walked straight off a cliff. Now, contrast that with the Brooklyn Bridge. It has stood for over 140 years, a testament to engineering genius. When John Roebling and his team designed it, they didn't just fantasize about how majestic it would look. They spent the vast majority of their time in a state of productive paranoia. They imagined every possible way it could fail. Hurricanes, extreme cold, unprecedented weight loads, material fatigue, galloping winds. They didn't just ask, how do we make it stand? They relentlessly asked, what could make it fall? And by systematically designing solutions to prevent each and every one of those failures, they built something that has long outlasted them. This isn't a story about business or bridges. It's a story about a profound glitch in how we are wired to think. We are obsessed with finding the blueprint for success, but we completely ignore the much clearer, much more effective blueprint for avoiding failure. What if I told you there's a mental tool, a way of thinking used by ancient philosophers, world-class mathematicians, and some of the wealthiest investors in history that flips this entire process on its head? A tool that can bring clarity to your most complex problems, whether in your career, your relationships, or your personal growth. This is the blueprint for inversion, and it might be the most powerful way of thinking you've never been taught. Welcome to Psych Blueprint, the place where we decode the psychology of a well-designed life. The concept of inversion is, at its core, breathtakingly simple. It means to turn a problem upside down. Instead of asking the forward-facing question, you ask the backward-facing one. Instead of asking, how can I be happy? You invert it and ask, what would guarantee a life of misery? Instead of, how can I improve my team's productivity? You ask, what are all the things we could do to destroy productivity? Instead of, what makes a great long-term relationship? You ask, what would be the fastest way to ruin a relationship? The billionaire investor Charlie Munger, vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and arguably one of the most rational minds of our time, has made this the cornerstone of his life's philosophy. He famously said, "It is remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid, instead of trying to be very intelligent." That's the essence of inversion. It's not about seeking brilliance. It's about systematically avoiding stupidity, and that's a much more achievable and reliable goal. Why? Because the paths to success are often infinite, complex, and hidden in a fog of luck and circumstance. But the paths to failure? They are often finite, identifiable, and surprisingly universal. There are 1,000 ways to build a successful company, but there's a much shorter list of things that will kill it every time. Running out of money, making a product nobody wants, having a toxic culture. There are countless ways to live a fulfilling life, but the recipe for a miserable one is well known. Cultivate envy, be unreliable, blame others for your problems, and never learn from your mistakes. Inversion gives you a clear map of the terrain by first highlighting all the potholes, landmines, and cliffs to avoid. Once you know where not to step, navigating the rest of the journey becomes dramatically easier. This powerful idea of thinking backward isn't some modern productivity hack. It's a form of timeless wisdom, independently discovered by great thinkers across different domains. In the 19th century, the German mathematician Carl Jacobi was renowned for solving incredibly difficult problems. When faced with a seemingly impossible proof, his go-to strategy was, man muss immer umkehren, one must always invert. By reformulating the problem in its inverse form, he could often find solutions that were invisible from the forward perspective. But we can go back even further. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome built their entire operating system for life around a form of inversion. They practiced what was called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before a long journey, a philosopher like Seneca wouldn't just think about his destination. He would actively contemplate everything that could go wrong. His ship could sink, he could be robbed, he could fall ill. Now this sounds pessimistic, but it was the exact opposite. By thinking through the worst-case scenarios in advance, he accomplished two things. First, he could take practical steps to prevent them. Second, he robbed them of their power to create fear and anxiety. He had already faced them in his mind, and in doing so, he became more resilient and prepared for whatever reality threw at him. He inverted the quest for a smooth journey into an exercise in avoiding a disastrous one. So, at its core, inversion is the practice of defining the anti-goal. It's about meticulously studying the causes of failure to understand the prerequisites for success. It's a diagnostic tool that helps you see the whole picture, not just the rosy, sunlit part you want to see. So why is this simple flip in perspective so effective? It works because it masterfully sidesteps some of the most common and dangerous glitches in our mental software, our cognitive biases. First, and most importantly, it neutralizes optimism bias. We are evolutionarily wired to be overly optimistic about our own abilities and chances of success. We think we're better than average drivers, that our projects will finish on time, and that our brilliant ideas are immune to failure. This bias feels good, but it makes us blind to very real risks. When you invert a problem and force yourself to list all the ways you can fail, you are directly confronting this bias. You're swapping out your rose-tinted glasses for a high-powered microscope focused on potential threats. Second, it short-circuits confirmation bias. This is our brain's tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs. If you believe your business idea is a winner, you will subconsciously filter the world for evidence that you're right. You'll celebrate the positive feedback and dismiss the negative. But when you ask, how could this business fail? You are forcing your brain onto a completely different mission. You are now actively hunting for disconfirming evidence, the very thing confirmation bias tells you to ignore. This creates a much more balanced and realistic view. And third, inversion transforms vague problems into concrete actions. How do I live a good life? Is a beautiful question, but it's so broad it's paralyzing. Where do you even start? But the inverted question, what would ruin my life, generates immediate, actionable clarity. Don't get into crippling debt. Don't destroy your health. Don't betray the trust of people you love. Don't stop learning. Suddenly, you have a set of clear guardrails, a list of things to avoid. The path to a good life isn't about finding a single magic bullet, but about systematically avoiding the poison. The true power of this mental model is best illustrated by one of the greatest scientific thinkers in history, Charles Darwin. For 20 years after his voyage on the HMS Beagle, Darwin meticulously developed his theory of evolution by natural selection. But he didn't just spend his time collecting evidence that supported his groundbreaking idea. He did something remarkable, something that demonstrates intellectual inversion at its finest. Darwin kept a special section in his notebook dedicated exclusively to collecting facts, observations and arguments that seemed to contradict his theory. He knew that the human mind, including his own, was prone to confirmation bias. He knew he would be more likely to forget or dismiss evidence that challenged his pet theory. So he inverted his process. He actively sought out and documented the things that could prove him wrong. He asked himself, what observations, if true, would completely falsify my entire theory? He worried about complex organs like the eye, which seemed too perfect to have evolved by chance. He wrestled with the gaps in the fossil record. He didn't hide from these problems. He hunted them down, and in doing so, he made his theory exponentially stronger. By confronting the strongest arguments against his work, he was forced to find better evidence, refine his logic, and build a case that was virtually unassailable. He didn't just try to be right, he tried his absolute hardest not to be wrong. This intellectual honesty, this commitment to inversion, is a major reason why The Origin of Species is one of the most influential books ever written. He avoided the failure of a weak argument, and in doing so, achieved a success that changed the world. This is the so what Inversion isn't just a clever trick. It's a foundational principle for producing robust, resilient, and world-changing work. Understanding inversion is one thing. Applying it is another. So here is your Psych blueprint. 3 practical, actionable strategies to start thinking backward today. Blueprint strategy. 1. The Failure Premortem. This is a powerful technique popularized by the psychologist Gary Klein, and its inversion in a team setting. Here's how it works. When you're about to kick off a new project, whether it's launching a product, planning a major event, or even a personal goal like running a marathon, gather your team or just sit down with yourself and say this. Imagine we are 6 months in the future. The project has failed. It was a complete and utter disaster. Now take 5 minutes and write down every single reason you can think of for why it failed. This simple act of framing is magical. Instead of a vague fear of failure, you get a concrete list of potential causes. People will say things they'd never say in an optimistic kickoff meeting. We failed because we ran out of money. We failed because marketing and engineering weren't communicating. We failed because we ignored early negative feedback from users. Once you have this list of potential failure points, you can systematically work to address and mitigate each one. You've used a fictional failure to prevent a real one. Blueprint strategy 2. The not-to-do list. We are all obsessed with our to-do lists. They represent our ambitions, our goals, our march toward progress. But what about a not-to-do list? This is an inversion of daily productivity. A not-to-do list is a set of personal rules for things you will actively avoid because you know they lead to negative outcomes. Your list could include things like, do not check email first thing in the morning. Do not attend a meeting that doesn't have a clear agenda. Do not engage in pointless arguments on social media. Do not say yes to a commitment that doesn't excite you. A to-do list adds things to your day. A not-to-do list protects your time, your energy, and your focus. It's about recognizing that what you don't do is often just as important as what you do. Start with just 3 not-to-dos for your week and see how much more effective you become. Blueprint strategy 3. The power of subtraction. When we want to improve our lives, our default mode is addition. We think, I need more money to be happy. I need to add a new morning routine. I need to buy that new gadget to be more productive. Inversion asks a different question. What can I remove to improve my life? This is the subtraction method. Often, the biggest gains don't come from adding more, but from removing what's holding you back. Instead of adding more income, what if you removed your debt? Instead of adding a new productivity app, what if you remove the social media apps that distract you? Instead of looking for new friends, what if you removed the toxic, draining relationships already in your life? Improving by adding is complex. Improving by subtracting is simple and powerful. Look at your life, your health, your finances, and your relationships. Ask yourself, what is the single biggest source of friction, anxiety, or negativity here? And what is my plan to remove it? The 3 strategies, the premortem, the not-to-do list, and the power of subtraction, are more than just techniques. They are a fundamental shift in perspective. They are your first steps to becoming an inversion thinker. To think backward is not to be a pessimist. It is to be a realist of the highest order. It's an acknowledgement that in a complex world, the path to wisdom often lies in avoiding common pitfalls rather than in searching for a stroke of genius. It's about building a sturdy bridge over a chasm by first understanding all the ways it could collapse. The blueprint for a successful career, a strong relationship, or a fulfilling life isn't just about the grand architectural plans for what you want to build. It's also, and perhaps more importantly, about the clear, unmissable warnings marking the areas of unstable ground. Inversion gives you the power to see those warnings. It empowers you to focus on what you can control, the avoidance of predictable errors, and in doing so, it dramatically increases your chances of arriving at your desired destination. So I'll leave you with a question to begin your own practice of inversion. Thinking about your biggest goal right now, what is the single most important thing you should avoid doing to ensure you don't fail? Let us know in the comments below. Sharing your not to do might just be the insight someone else needs to see. And if this blueprint gave you a new tool for your mental toolkit, please hit the like button and subscribe to Psych Blueprint. We're here to help you design a better mind and a better life. Thanks for watching.